Welcome to a new wave of entrepreneurship. I'm Scott Sturt, founder and CEO of Venture for Canada, and your host. The focus of this podcast is to hear from changemakers and young Canadian entrepreneurs to learn about how they've developed their entrepreneurial mindset and skills. In Season 2, we'll be chatting with young Canadians about their unconventional career trajectories and what it's like to be young entrepreneurial leaders. I'm excited to dive into these conversations about how to foster your entrepreneurial mindset and drive. I am super excited to welcome Natasha Dhayagude to this week's episode of A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. Natasha is the CEO and co-founder of Chinova Bioworks. The company was founded in 2016 and has developed a natural, clean label preservative extracted from mushrooms for various food and beverage applications. Natasha was named and awarded Startup Canada's Young Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017 and Startup Canada's Women Entrepreneur of the Year in 2019 for her work in founding Chinova. Since then, she has raised $4.5 million in investment from major food tech venture capitalists and has formed strategic partnerships with major multinational producers in the food tech industry. The company is headquartered in Atlantic, Canada, with a team that consists 90% of women in the science, technology, engineering, and math fields. Thank you for joining us, Natasha. How are you this afternoon?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Scott.
It's awesome to hear that you're well this afternoon. So I want us to start by you telling us more about your first few years as an entrepreneur. What were your biggest challenges and how did you overcome them?
For sure. So the first few years for us were really focused on research and development. So research and development is really a core component of our business, and it forms the basis of product development for our business. So some of the biggest challenges we faced were, one, I would say finding access to lab facilities in order to do the work, develop a prototype, so we can work with clients to actually validate that this technology was working, was a really big one. And there's not a lot of access to lab facilities within the area. Two, having the right expertise on the team is always important, core to anybody starting a new business. We really needed the right expertise when it came to guiding our technical and research and development strategy, because again, that was core to helping to build the product lines that we've commercialized in the market today. And then three, I would say, like any other entrepreneur, the biggest thing was having financial resources or having the investment to help us back that up and actually develop a product and bring it to market and basically have the operating expenses we needed in order to establish a company. So I would say those were the biggest challenges in terms of the company and where we were in those first couple of years. My personal challenges really revolved around setting the vision, the strategy, plan of execution for my team, and managing that entire process and making sure that I was able to deliver and help these challenges that we were facing as a business, because I was the driving force. I was the CEO. So they were looking to me to really do that. I had no prior experience. So I was really faced with running a company where I needed to manage and provide my team with some sort of guidance, strategy, and a mission to believe in what we were doing. So I really had to anticipate what we needed now and what we needed 6 months from now, or what we needed 5 years from now. And that was, I think, the biggest challenge for me in how do I do that and how do I have the answer for everybody. So for me, I always played this game where I put myself in someone else's shoes who already had an established company. And I would say, okay, what did they do? What processes did they implement? And how did they execute on this? So instead of reinventing the wheel, I really looked to other companies within the space and modeled myself after those companies. I took the biggest successes that they had, I took the biggest failures that they had, and I really learned from them. And then I just try to model my vision after that. So I wasn't, again, reinventing that entire process because it was already done. And so that's one of the biggest things that was a big learning lesson for me, as in those first couple of years, that really helped to bring the company where we are today.
That's an excellent point about the importance of role models and kind of looking at people who've done what you want to do and seeing the success that they've created. Out of interest, what are some of the companies that you look to as role models?
Yeah, there's a lot of amazing companies within this space. I really focused it on our specific industry. So I looked at some of the other ingredient companies in the space. I looked at the multinationals in the space that were potential competitors. And I looked at, how did they drive the technical side? How did they drive the innovation side? How did they drive the overall business strategy? And how did they accomplish those major milestones? Obviously, those companies had large investment backings, but still it's important to know, even if you have large investment backings, what to do with that money and where to put it and where to prioritize and what departments to put it in. So I used the competitors that we evaluated as a really good source, and it worked my way backwards from there, in how they got there in their journey. I also used a lot of startups as examples, within the space that had been really successful at using the financial investment that they raised, and prioritizing where to put it. That was really, really key for me, because I think that's really what makes or breaks the company. You can raise a lot of investment, but how do you know where it should go? And so I used our competitors, I used some small to medium sized companies in the space, and those were really my basis for remodeling after.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and a lot of the times I think entrepreneurs or the public will assess a company just based on the amount of money it raises. And there's lots of companies that raise lots of money that don't end up going anywhere. Kind of going back in time a little bit, when you were first, can you, I guess, give us a little bit of background of the origin story of Chinova, and can you walk through? And one of the things I always find fascinating is and especially in companies like yours where you're building an actual physical product and it's very research and design intensive and there's a lot of capital and it's very complicated, is how people make that jump from a concept or research to actually getting the money to commercialize it. And I think that the kind of business that you're building is probably one of the most challenging to build, a lot more challenging than than certainly if someone had like a marketing agency, or even if somebody I think is a software as a service company. It's very complex and there's lots of regulatory approvals and different things in your space. So can you walk us through a little bit of the origin story of the company, and how are you able to get it off the ground in that first year or two?
For sure. So, well, after I graduated, so my background is in biochemistry and microbiology. I started working at Planet Hatch. So Planet Hatch is located in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and it's an incubator slash accelerator program. And my role really revolved around helping entrepreneurs and businesses, and providing them with the resources that they needed, not just now, but I had to anticipate what their needs would be a year from when they started their business. And so at one of the events, I actually ended up meeting my co-founder, David, who has a background in biotechnology. And I had always had this nagging feeling as I was working in the world of entrepreneurship and really learning about it. I really wanted to somehow incorporate my background in science and use my textbook knowledge to solve a real world problem, and not just work in research and development, but use that R&D to then commercialize a product that was able to help society in a specific way. When I met David, we got along, we had very similar thoughts on that, and we came across a technology that he had been working on and he had been researching, which was this extract from mushrooms. And we found that this extract was really good at protecting different foods and beverages from spoiling. So at the same time, within the food and beverage industry, consumers were really demanding transparency when it came to the different ingredients in their food and beverage products. They were looking for natural, healthy, sustainable ingredients that have some sort of purpose in the final product, which they now define in the food industry as clean label. So brands were forced to reformulate, and they were under a lot of pressure to kind of keep up with that consumer demand. So when we found this ingredient and we looked at the trends that were occurring within the industry, we thought this was a great fit. Preservation is essential for almost all consumer products. And brands have been using the same artificial ingredients for years. There's just not a lot of innovation or disruption within the food manufacturing preservation ingredient space. So we found though that making that shift from artificial to natural is a huge challenge. You know, brands have to ensure food safety, shelf life, and the overall quality of their products. And this is really where our technology could help fill that gap. And so that's how Chinova was born, out of this need and necessity in the market that we assessed. So we started about 6 years ago with that mission to provide brands with what they really needed, and consumers with what they expected from those brands.
How did you get the initial capital to actually commercialize the product? What was your process of raising that money? And to your earlier point about research and development, what did you need, like kind of more tangibly, where what do you need the funds for in terms of the commercializing the product and bringing it to market?
Yeah, for sure. So when we first started the company, we we participated in an accelerator right away. So 2 weeks after incorporating the company, we got into an accelerator program called Indie Bio. And I flew out to Ireland. That's where it was taking place. And I actually had a chance to live in Ireland for about 6 months throughout this program. And as a part of this accelerator, we had access to a lab, which for us was absolutely essential in building our prototype and validating our technology. And it also came with access to some investment. So that was the first thing that we had. It came with, I think, $250,000 in investment. And so that was the very first thing that we did. We hired a technical expert, and it was me and him in the lab all day just building out our product. And we knew that in order to build this company, first we needed a prototype, and we needed people to really believe in the mission and show them that we were solving a big gap in the market. And so that was kind of the first thing that we went through and started doing. After that program, I think what really helped us was because it was so industry specific, we had access to the right mentors and scientists that had previously worked on projects and bringing them out of R&D into commercial market. And so we really looked to them for their expertise and how they navigated that. And the best thing to do in that case was really to test it with clients, even to test an early prototype with a client, ask them, how is this? Where would you optimize this? Where is it working? How would you even present this information to other clients? This was absolutely essential in our process and really helped out build each one of our product lines to date.
Talking to clients and potential customers at the very beginning is so crucial in I think almost any business. And unfortunately, a lot of the times people do too late, and then it can sabotage the business. The Kauffman Foundation and a lot of organizations that study entrepreneurship find that the most common reason why businesses fail is because they build things people don't want. And I think it's really strategic that you did that on the outset. With regards to your participation in the accelerator program, there's probably thousands of accelerator programs around the world, and I know it's something that a lot of startups startups will debate the pros and cons of participating in accelerators. So what advice would you give to a startup if they're considering going into an accelerator or incubator in general in terms of assessing whether it's worth it? And second off is if you've decided to join a incubator or accelerator, what advice do you have on how startups can get the most out of that experience?
That's a great question. So yeah, like you said, there's tons of different accelerators to choose from. There's a lot of noise within the industry. For us, from personal experience, what I thought really helped was participating in industry specific accelerators. And that's really what I focused on. And I tried to understand, like, if I were to participate in this accelerator, what need was that accelerator going to solve for me? So when we participated in Indie Bio, it was very, very early, I knew what I needed. I knew I needed, access to in-kind resources, needed to talk to a law firm to talk about basic incorporation, needed to talk about to a patent lawyer to understand how do you even file a patent? What does that process even look like? So it was very basic questions that I needed help answering. And so IndieBio really, really helped us with that. Not only that, but it really helped us, again, access to lab. That was really important for us. So just having that was absolutely crucial for us. And so that for me really helped. Later on, as we continued to build a product and validate it, and we were testing in the market, the next thing I knew that I needed was I needed to talk to clients. I needed to form partnerships to validate the product at maybe pilot scale to see how it was operating in larger scale manufacturing. And so I looked at accelerators that would specifically help me do it. So we participated in Terra, and then we participated in Plug and Play based in San Francisco and California. So access to these accelerators at the time when we wanted to do them, we didn't need to raise investment. So I wasn't really looking for that, but I was looking at other benefits, which included access to food and beverage specific clients, which included partnerships with multinationals where we can pilot our technology with them to help validate our technology, and then access to industry specific mentors that would help support the strategy for the company as we grew and move forward. So through my personal experience, I just always say industry specific programming or accelerators have just been a major asset for us. And that's why we participated in about 3 or 4 of these accelerators.
And one of the things I'm really hearing from you is that it's the network. It's what are the relationships that you can build out of participation in an accelerator program, and how can that help propel your company moving forward, particularly in those early days? On the topic of partnerships, can you walk us through a little bit about how strategic partnerships have helped the growth of Chinova, and maybe really focus on one strategic partnership in particular that has been a game changer for your business?
For sure. So I can't disclose a lot of the names of the clients that we're working with, but I will say we started working with a strategic partner in 2018. They're a multinational ingredient company within the space. And so they were a perfect example of a company that I'd looked to very early on as a potential competitor to our business, but I didn't want to look at it that way. I looked at it in a way that, yeah, but they could be a really great partner for our business because they could potentially help with distribution, and they know everything about the preservation landscape, and they have many different preservative ingredients within their portfolio. So we could leverage this expertise, we could leverage this knowledge, and it would really propel us forward. This strategic partner also had an investment arm. And so back in 2018, I went to their headquarters, and they're based in the Netherlands, where I pitched to their team, I pitched to their business development experts, their technical experts, and their investment side. And it was a perfect fit with our technology. They completely understood what we were doing. They completely understand the space, and they knew exactly how to work with us. And so it was such an advantage to have this benefit. So they actually ended up investing in the company. We went through a 2-year validation of the technology with them. So what's better to have than that gold star standard pressed on your company by a major multinational within the ingredient space? So a lot of the clients that we got, because we had that approval, because they had audited our manufacturing site, they were really excited to work with us because they knew that we were given that industry standard or star. So we really leveraged that, and we actually have them on our board, and they're helping us drive the strategy of the company forward.
It's a wonderful example of building a really impactful strategic partnership, and how it goes on many different levels, from both product development to sales to being an investor. There's an opportunity for partnerships to go in many different kind of directions, and ultimately it's about building those really strong relationships. In the Canadian entrepreneurship space, there's definitely challenges around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the founder demographics of the country are not necessarily representative of Canada's demographics, unfortunately. As a woman of color in the science, technology, and engineering and math field, and also in particular somebody running a company in Fredericton in New Brunswick, which is not just demographically the most diverse place in the country. Speaking as Atlantic Canadian myself, what do you think are some of the unique challenges and barriers that women of color face in pursuing entrepreneurship, and what do you think are policies or that can be implemented to help level the playing field and reduce some of those systemic barriers?
This is such an interesting question, and I get asked this question quite a bit. So I just kind of want to tell you my personal experience and my story and what I've discovered through my process of running the company as a woman minority within this field. So if you had asked me this question in the first few years of starting the company, I really wouldn't have much to contribute. Those first few years, I really didn't think about gender gaps or that I was a female minority leading a company. I was just solely focused on building my company and surrounding myself with people that were just as passionate about building my company. As the company continued to grow, the team grew, the investment we raised grew, I started to notice a few subtle things. So firstly, I noticed whenever my co-founder and I would enter a meeting, and he's a white male, people would always assume that he was in charge, and they would always look to him for final input on things. It was really strange, but I was really quick to shut it down. I also started noticing that I wasn't really getting a lot of the credit I deserve for major milestones or any new ideas that I was bringing to the table as the company continued to grow. And so because of this, I really chose to speak up, and I made sure that people knew that I was the driving force behind implementing these ideas. After a while, I found like these things shifted and changed, and people really did start to view me as the CEO and the leader, but with really, really strange connotations. So they would often describe my personality as aggressive, assertive, loud, attention-seeking, maybe even bitchy at times. So I really didn't know what was going on. I really didn't understand. And I talked to Dave quite a bit about it. From what I could tell, he didn't really share any of the same feelings. So for me, this was interesting. I started really looking into, am I alone in this? Am I failing in this? And I just started to question myself quite a lot. And I think that's what happens to a vast majority of women or women minorities that are leading companies or just leading anything in general. They just start questioning things, and they maybe think, is this my fault, or am I failing in a certain way? This is around the same time I came across this article that was in Harvard Business Review, where I read like 70% of all executives are males, and they typically have some type of alpha-like tendencies. So I started thinking, okay, I would typically categorize myself as a very traditional female woman. The only differences here, I would say, is like I'm really outspoken, and I exude a sense of entitlement to be treated exactly similarly to any of my white male peers. So what I started thinking is that's the ultimate sin. For a woman of color living in a white male or dominant society, I behave and expect to be treated like an alpha or similarly to that white male. Just having these characteristics alone have been a really big challenge, I would say. And that's what I face every day as a woman minority. So people generally don't like the term alpha. They associate alpha women with aggressive, assertive, completely dominant. People don't understand that you can be an aware and adaptive alpha, knowing exactly when to turn on your alpha or turn down your alpha. So I found that these are the things that I really struggle with doing, but I am pretty dominant, and but I'm aware when to turn it up and when to turn it down. And I think that if women were able to own their inner alpha and have then they'd have that opportunity to be more powerful and influential and really take on positions that matter and help create some societal change.
I remember reading an article a while ago and it was talking about retiring the word bossy, in particular as it relates to women. And there are so many more challenges that women face, particularly women who are assertive, where they get put in a box or they're they're called all the adjectives that you described. And I think it's so important that we shift the narrative on this. And I think, by the way, people like yourself as role models, each person like yourself, I think, helps shift the narrative and kind of dialogue in a positive direction. And I think many people, you're a trailblazer, I think, in terms of helping to shift that narrative. But I agree, there's a lot of very strong systemic barriers in place facing a lot of women. On the topic of sort of intersectionality and being both a woman and a woman of color, what are certain unique challenges that you think women of color entrepreneurs in particular face?
I would say, I think it's difficult to maybe have the same. So a lot of the things that happen sometimes is because you're female and you're also minority, one of two things end up happening. One, you're completely ignored and you're just not a part of the narrative. Or two, the spotlight and the limelight is completely focused on you. Um, in a sense that, you know, they want to honor you, but you start to think, is this based on my merits, or is this based on the fact that I'm a woman of color and that there's not a lot of women of color within the field? So I always go back and forth on this, and I think I've settled with, at least I'm given the opportunity. So I will take the opportunity, I will get out into the spotlight, and maybe that will then help create the seats or help create and change the narrative for them to accept other women of color and just give them more opportunities. So I think I've settled on that, but I always go back and forth.
Yeah, that is a very thoughtful point, and I agree. I think that when people think of intersectionality, there are those unique challenges, right, where women face systemic barriers in our society, and then people of color face systemic challenges, and then there's that kind of Venn diagram of overlap, and there are unique challenges, and certainly I think as people talk about kind of white feminism and some of the things, the importance that feminism is inclusive of people of all backgrounds is something that is super important. Shifting gears a little bit, you're also involved in entrepreneurship through your family, and I've seen on Instagram the great Glamp Camp, and it looks fantastic. One day when I visit New Brunswick, I definitely want to stay at your property. Can you tell us a little bit about Glamp Camp? What is the business? And obviously, it's in a very different field than what Chinova works on. What are some lessons that you've learned from helping out with Glamp Camp, and are any of those lessons transferable to your full-time work at Chinova?
Yes, it's completely different. But it's been really fun actually, helping my family build up Glam Camp. So Glam Camp is a glamping site. It's located in New Brunswick, Canada, near Grand Lake. We have 10 uniquely themed domes on the property, each equipped with their own wood-fired hot tub. And this was really my parents' dream. So I'm having so much fun just helping them build out that company within a completely different space, hospitality. I really didn't know much about it. So my role primarily involves helping with the marketing side, so handling all the social media. So again, I went into this completely blind. I really didn't know anything about the hospitality industry, anything about marketing. In my business at Chinova, we're solely focused on B2B marketing. We're a B2B company. So I really don't know anything about B2C marketing, and Glam Camp really opened my eyes to that. And it comes with a level of customer service that is completely different from what I deal with every day at Chinova. So that was really interesting to navigate. But I think it's been really fun for me because it's really allowed me to be creative, which I love. I experimented with so many different apps. Again, I did the same thing and used the same logic as when I was running Chinova. I really looked at other successful companies, glamping companies, camping companies within the space, hospitality companies that really had it right with their marketing. And again, I worked my way backwards. I looked at the messaging, I looked at the branding, I saw certain things would, you know, have consumers would really take to it. They would get that light bulb moment where they really understood and they would really find the place appealing. And so I worked back from that, and I tried to implement that within Glam Camp. One thing that I found that's been really helpful is the community support and our loyal customer base. They've been so great in helping us build and grow the Glam Camp communities, which is what we've created now. All the New Brunswick small businesses really rallied together. They were happy to enter into partnerships with us to help grow that community when we first started the business. And now we've been able to successfully grow it to over 10,000 followers across all of our social media channels. So it's been a really great journey. I would say like the lessons that I've learned is, one, supporting small businesses. It's so important, especially through the pandemic. And my mission with Glam Camp was to really give back to the community, really help others, help all the other up and coming small businesses grow, and just have them be a part of the community that we were able to successfully create. Another big thing is where we're located. So we're located in Waterboro, New Brunswick. So job creation obviously is important, but it's really important that we hired within the area. And so we really hired the services and help from the area, which just adds great value to the local economy there. And then lastly, just navigating customer service. Like I say, learning how to interact with people, servicing their needs, staying on top of bookings and inquiries. That's a huge task. Small business owners really give it their all. If anyone has any doubt about that, I will tell you, they're amazing. They don't even have a lot of resources. They have very limited funding, everything, but they put everything they have into their businesses. And so putting a spotlight on New Brunswick and attracting people to come to New Brunswick has been really a big part of our mission.
And my thoughts definitely go in particular to the travel entrepreneurs or the people in the travel sector during this time, because I know it's because of the pandemic, it's been so hard for a lot of travel entrepreneurs. And I think that the travel entrepreneurs work they pour their heart and souls into their companies, and they're such a service oriented business, and there's probably almost no sector that has been hit harder in the pandemic than travel companies. And I think the resilience of those entrepreneurs through the last year has been incredibly remarkable. And it is so important to celebrate and to support small business owners, not just during the pandemic, but at all times. It's pretty remarkable. In 7 years since you graduated, you've done a lot of different things. You worked at Planet Hatch. You have built a multi-million-dollar company, participated in all these accelerator programs. If you were to go back in time and to speak with Natasha of 2014, and you were to give Natasha of 2014 some advice, what would the advice be, and why?
That's a great question. I think the biggest piece of advice would be patience. And I've said this before. I think I was very impatient at the beginning when we first started this company, and I didn't realize it's a food ingredient manufacturing company. You don't just build a product in a lab and then go sell it to people. You have to build it, validate it. It takes time to build it, and then you have to scale it up. You have to actually scale it up. It may perform differently at a lab level. It may perform differently when it's all scaled up, and you have to then put the financial resources behind you purchasing all of that and then managing it. And so I think patience for me was really key. In my worst cases, where I was really impatient at the beginning, I had this rapid fire process where it would create a lot of conflict between me and the people that I worked with. It kind of made me jump to conclusions without fully processing information or taking the time to understand the situation. It would really cloud and damage some of my relationships when we first started the company, because again, I was so impatient and really wanted to just accelerate things forward. So now I think what I've really learned is that nothing of value comes easily. In fact, anything of value takes time. And whether it's a matter of like developing a skill, working on marketing for Glam Camp, whatever it is, everything takes time, and you have to have the utmost patience and resilience through that process. So I think that's the key, and that's what I would say as I continue to grow Chinova and it becomes even more complex in structure and harder to navigate. I always bring it back to that.
Patience is so key, I think, in entrepreneurship. I was speaking to someone this morning, and that's what I mentioned, this Bill Gates quote, which is basically where he says people overestimate what you can do in 3 years and underestimate what you can do in 10. And that's my experience. I've been doing Venture for Canada full time for almost exactly 7 years. And I find that I remember after the first year or two, I was kind of like, oh, is this all I've accomplished? Like, I haven't hit my goals. Why is this taking so long? And eventually you persevere and you get there. And in many ways, Venture Canada has exceeded what I initially thought in terms of what we would do. But can often take a lot longer than I always find. Take how long you think it's going to take and like double it.
100%.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really good advice. The other thing too is I think when someone's 22 or just like a recent grad, there's this impatience, partly because someone doesn't have that much life experience. So I think there's a natural inclination to just think everything happens fast when it often takes just a long time to build anything.
100%. It's always that fear of missing out, fearful that someone's building faster than you, but not understanding that people are on different timelines and people are at different stages of life. And that's why I think it drives that impatience in when you're really young, in your early 20s. And that's exactly what happened to me.
And that perfectionism is often an enemy. That it's I would say as I'm trying to be a reformed perfectionist, and I think one of the things is that when having a perfectionist personality can create a lot of challenges because it causes there's all this negative self-talk and, oh, why haven't I done this? I set this ambitious goal and I didn't achieve it, and all of these kinds of things. And I think that there's this fine line between ambition and striving and then perfectionism. So out of interest on the topic is, have you ever struggled with perfectionism? And yeah, if so, what's your experiences?
I definitely struggle with perfectionism. One of the ways that I'm able to handle that, though, is sometimes I just need to be given a reality check. And I find that my family is really always there to do that for me. And one of the biggest things is don't take yourself so seriously. Always taking yourself seriously, I find just it adds to that, and it adds to that narrative of like everything's so difficult, everything is so hard, I need to be the best, I need to be the most ambitious, I need to make sure that I accomplish my goals on time. Yes, that's all great, but everything does not have to be serious all the time. It can be really demoralizing when you push yourself so hard to be that perfect person. So instead, just choose to enjoy the little things in life. And that's really what I've learned, especially through the pandemic. Going on those walks with your family, everybody did that through the pandemic. Taking the time to talk to my best friend about absolutely nothing has been amazing. Going online shopping to shop for random items that I don't need, amazing and therapeutic process. So I find those things really, really help me. I think disengaging from constantly working has been really great and has been really refreshing. And that's how I stay on top of it.
Doing things sometimes just because you want to do them is I was talking to somebody this morning about that, and just the importance of sometimes, for instance, exercise, like running is something I like to do, but then I'll often sometimes view it, oh, this is an efficiency, like I need to do. And it's viewing, one of the things I'm trying to work on is shifting running from something that is just a task that I check off on my list to something that I'm just doing because I like it. And it's just for doing it out of sheer enjoyment, and that's it.
100%. I agree. I also was in this habit of every day I would try to measure the success of every day. which doesn't make any sense, honestly. Like, it's great, but then when you don't accomplish those tasks, you feel so bad about it and you're in such a bad mental state. So I think just treating things that you like to do for fun, exactly like you said, not as tasks, and simply just doing them and having that bit of fun, just allow yourself to do that. Why don't we allow ourselves to do that anymore? We used to do it when we were through high school or elementary school or middle school. Bring that back into your narrative, and it's been great.
And on that point, I think it's a perfect note on the podcast for many listeners or entrepreneurial people. I know a lot of Venture for Canada fellows are perfectionists or reformed perfectionists. And it's something I think a lot of entrepreneurial people struggle with, and I think is a really important message. We have covered a ton of different topics today on this episode. We talked about research and development. We talked about role models. We talked about the origins story of Chinova. We talked about the food preservation industry, incubators and accelerators, barriers facing women of color in entrepreneurship, and perfectionism. A really wide range of topics in only around 40 minutes. Natasha is a remarkable person. She's also a 2016 Venture for Canada fellow. She was a member of the second cohort. And I remember when you went to Ireland, it was hard to believe that was five years ago. And it's been amazing getting to know you, Natasha, over the last 5 years. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast this afternoon.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, Scott.
That's it for this week's episode of A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. Stay connected with us via our social and our email list. Subscribe to us in your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss our next episode. If you have feedback on today's episode, tweet us at Venture4Canada. That is Venture, the number 4, Canada, or email us at podcast@venture4, that's spelled FOR, Canada.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. I'm Scott Stewart, and until next time, stay safe, stay motivated, and stay grateful. A New Wave of Entrepreneurship is produced by Juanita Lee Garcia and Latifa Farah. Editing and mixing also done by Latifa Farah. Erica Ormanston is our editorial assistant. Mark Wallach and Premium Beat own the copyright and publishing rights related to the song used in this podcast. The comments and opinions, recommendations, or suggestions expressed on the podcast by the guests are not liable to Venture for Canada and belong solely to each individual. Any information provided stated by our guests and our host is independent of Venture for Canada. A New Wave of Entrepreneurship is a Venture for Canada brand, and all content is owned by Venture for Canada. If you'd like to use our content, please reach out to us at podcast@venture4, that's spelled FOR, Canada.ca.